Llévate más de lo que esperas todos los días con el nuevo McValue en McDonald's. Ahora puedes comprar uno y sumarle otro por $1. Así que cuando tu equipo favorito enfrente a sus rivales, enfrenta tus antojos con $5 Meal Deals. Y si estás corriendo para alcanzar el desayuno, corre a la app para llevarte ofertas antes del cutoff. Tú decides, y con McValue, tu decisión siempre rinde más. Precios y participación pueden variar. BOGO $1 válido para un producto de igual o menor valor. Debe estar registrado en Rewards para ofertas en el app.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, 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 come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means and that's Stefan Krajisnik. This is your Monday pod, the Leave No Doubt pod. It's volume 2 of the Leave No Doubt pod. I cannot believe we had to name this pod, man. It's listen, I'm happy for you as a fan that your team won a national championship. I'm happy for the players, the individual human beings that they won a national championship. Kudos to them. It was cool for us, Stefan. The first year of the 12-team college football playoff, we got to cover it from start to literally from start to finish because Ohio State had to play in the first round. So we got the full 12-team playoff experience. All of it was cool. I just didn't want to name the pod. And so now I had to name the pod. Leave No Doubt pod. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it so much. I hate it. No, I actually do love the name. I hate that there is a name. Let me make that abundantly clear. It's not about what the name is. It's about the fact that over. Yeah. You know, it was the end of an era. It's like Counter Stallions, the end of an era.
All right, let's not do that.
I know. Okay. I don't even know how to transition into what we're actually talking about today.
So
anyways, depth charts. Last week we projected the Ohio State starting 22 on offense. So really the 2 deep. I don't know why I said starting 22. The 2 deep on offense a way too early look. We'll probably do it again coming out of the spring and then maybe one more time before we head into fall camp. This week is going to be defense, where just as much new, only 3 returning starters, but I don't think there's much conversation right now, Stefan. Now, granted, we don't know what's going to happen over the next 9 months. We get in the fall camp and we see, oh, look at that. Lorenzo Styles is high safety right now. That changes our leverage on some things. But I think right now, whoever is going to be the new defensive coordinator isn't going to be pulling his hair out, unless you're Jim Knowles and you don't have any hair, and trying to figure out who is starting 22 are going to be.
Yeah, I agree. Looking through, the post you published on, your projected depth chart, I kind of went through it and I was like, this might not be an all too entertaining podcast because I think we agree on every spot. There's one thing that you have that's more, not necessarily something I disagree with, but something that's interesting. So if you want to start with the defensive line, we can get right into it.
I know where you're going with this in terms of interesting in the situation. I have the starting defensive ends at Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry. It's just the logical choice here. They played the most snaps of anybody who was coming back here. And again, they're replacing 2 guys, JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer, who had 21.5 sacks and 115 pressures last season. Kenyatta Jackson last year, 315 snaps. He turned that into 16 tackles, 16 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, a pass breakup, and he had a fumble recovery as well. Caden Curry this year, 231 snaps, turned that into 22 tackles for 4 tackles for loss and 2.5 sacks. He also made some plays on special teams, had a forced fumble on special teams as well. I'm assuming that is not where you have questions or you have interest about what the heck I decided to do here. So I'm going to continue to move through this.
Well, let me say one thing about the starters. I think we're both very excited about what Kenyatta and Caden Curry can do.
Yeah.
I'm starting to talk myself into 10-plus sacks for Caden Curry. I think he's going to have a big year. I think he's going to have a breakout year.
Okay. Well, let's talk about this.
This has nothing to do with him being from Indiana, of course.
It has everything to do with him being from Indiana and the fact that it seemed like Indiana might have been trying to steal him away this offseason. Caden Curry makes plays every time he's on the field. I think that's where that's born out of. So if it feels like in 231 snaps last year, half of those, something was done and you went, who did that? Oh, Caden Curry did that. Then, okay, what happens if he plays 400 snaps? Maybe, and he's going to be a good litmus test for what we were talking about last week, Stefan, and the idea of, listen, there's one thing when you're asked to play 15, 20 snaps a game. It's a whole other world when you're asked to play 45 to 50 snaps a game. Can you sustain what you are doing versus being a flash in the pan? I think Caden Curry is a good litmus test because that's what you're banking on. Small sample size, larger plate, he eats more. Versus the other side of that is his eyes are bigger than his stomach, and maybe he should only be playing 20 snaps a game.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you're spot on. I think he's going to be a big kind of test to see how that pans out for some of these guys. And maybe 10 is a high number, right? Maybe it's closer to 7 or 8, but I think that would still be a really strong season for him. I think, as good as he was in his defensive snaps, I think his special team snaps might be what gets me even more excited because, even on touchbacks, he was the one sprinting to the end zone, getting the crowd going. I think he was the one who really got the Ohio State fans going after they went up 7-0 at Oregon and then had a touchback, I think, on the ensuing kickoff. And he really he was the reason that we were all kind of like, oh, there's a lot of Ohio State fans in this building right now.
Yeah.
So shout out to Caden Curry for that. So I think he could have a big year. And I think it's just going to be a big help for him that I also think Kenyatta Jackson is a beast on the other side. And are they JT and Jack? No, those guys are, all the talent in the world. They lived up to all the expectations this year. But you saw the benefit that Jack had from having JT on the other side and the benefit JT had of having Jack on the other side. And maybe this is kind of the Team B version of that. But I think Caden and Kenyatta paired together could be one of the best defensive end combos, at least in the Big Ten.
And I know I'm about to say this about two guys, one who had 12.5 sacks and the other one who had 9 sacks. But I think if I had to rank guys based off of their ability to purely get after the passer, simply that, it's 3rd and 7, go get the quarterback. Mitchell Melton is 1. Now, he's at Virginia now. I think Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry might be 2 and 3. And again, JT Tuimoloau led the Big Ten in sacks this year. So I'm saying, I said that about a guy who, for most of his career, wasn't a sack guy and then became a sack guy the last 4 games of his career. And so did Jack Sawyer. But I think there's a chance that their pass rush takes a slight dip upwards, even if the other parts, right, the stopping the run, the setting the edge, the pursuit, some of that other stuff that made Jack and JT so good, maybe that takes a step back this year, which is part of the reason why I think, and maybe a lot of us are starting to think, that maybe this defensive front doesn't necessarily look the same, where it's always a 4-down front, which leads into the thing you were teasing at. But first, to tease it a little bit longer, I'm going to start with a defensive end. Zion Grady, number 82 player, number 9 defensive lineman, and edge rusher, in the 2025 recruiting class out of Alabama. I thought that it's a big deal. They got a top 100 recruit out of Alabama to leave not only Alabama, but leave the SEC to come play here at Ohio State. I thought, and there were multiple times I said this to Andrew during the year, when you're looking for signs that your old guy's going to do what old people do and retire, look at what the kids are doing. I don't think Zion Grady would have committed to Ohio State, let alone actually signed with Ohio State, if he truly believed Larry Johnson was not going to be here. This is not a Nick Saban situation where Caleb Downs got there and then randomly we were all like, wait, what? Nick Saban's retiring? That was not on anybody's radar. It's been on Ohio State fans' radar and really since 2017 of, hey, Larry Johnson's getting up there. When's he going to retire? 7 years later, he's still the defensive line coach. So at some point, how about we stop asking the question and let him just do it whenever he's going to do it? I don't think you get a defensive line class that's got that kid with that description here, unless he knew Larry Johnson was going to be here. Now, there's a bunch of other guys. I think they got 4 or 5 guys in this class, but that's the one who could have ended up at Bama who could have ended up at Georgia, who could have ended up at Oregon, given the fact that he left the South, Florida State, Texas, Oklahoma. He could have ended up anywhere, and he chose Ohio State as a kid from the heart of Alabama. And I think that is a guy where highly rated guys on the defensive line get in the 2 deep here. We saw it with Edric Houston last year. Jock and JT were in the 2 deep as true freshmen. Even Zach Harrison was in the 2 deep as a true freshman. Highly rated guys get in the 2 deep in year one, especially when your room is a little light on experience at the top of it. Okay, let's talk about CJ Hicks.
This is what I was alluding to.
He's my other guy. He's with the 2s right now because I'm not going to go, hey, CJ Hicks, the guy who barely played at linebacker. Let's put him at starting defensive end on day 1. That makes 0 sense. So, again, if we get in the spring, CJ's with the 1s, and he's terrorizing Julian Sain, Lincoln Keynos, and Tavian St. Clair, I'm going to responsibly say, hey, it might actually be formulating. I'm not going to go and do what Jim Knowles did 2 years ago, where he's talking about in 2023, we're going to unleash CJ Hicks, and then you didn't even unlock the gate for him. But I've seen and heard things that have led me to believe that he is on his way out of the linebacker room, at least full time. And we are going to see CJ Hicks off the edge a little bit more often in 2025, which we did see at least in a couple of games this year, Stefan.
Yeah, I feel bad for the 7,000th podcast in a row to bring up Jelani Thurman, but this is kind of the difference between these two. Of Jelani, it feels like we're waiting for kind of the physical traits to match up with the skill and really holding the position. With CJ, it's felt like his potential has never been tapped into because it's just felt like he's been at the wrong position altogether. And now we finally see, what we both think is going to be a logical move. And if this is it, this could be finally that breakout opportunity for CJ Hicks. And like you said, like maybe right now we have him as a backup on this depth chart. But listen, if you get to September and this dude is just terrorizing at the position, I mean, he's going to make a push for the starting job. And I think he's an intriguing piece just because you can move him around a ton. I mean, we've seen, how many times do you see, we saw a lot with Kenyatta actually last year where a defensive end kind of drops back into coverage. I mean, I know CJ Hicks gets criticized for his coverage a bit, but you trust him doing that role than a lot more defensive ends because he has a decent amount of experience and he kind of has more of the size and athleticism, I think, to do that kind of role. So there's a lot you can do with him if you put him in that role. And I think that would unlock a lot of things for Ohio State, especially if, early in the year, you've got some new guys. I mean, listen, we're talking about 7.5 new starters being put into that lineup, and guys are still kind of meshing. CJ Hicks could do some things to kind of make you overlook some other mistakes early on, right? Like he can do some things where it's, oh, this guy missed an assignment, but CJ Hicks made a play, so it doesn't really matter, His coverage
isn't great if you are grading him and evaluating him as a linebacker. And that's when you're already at the second level. Spatial awareness, reading and reacting, that's linebacker, especially in this system. That's very different than I'm either in a 3-point stance or I'm in that, position, that kind of rush position when they're standing rushers, which is, I'm sure, what they'll do most of the time. I don't know how often you're literally going to see his hand in the dirt. It's going to be standing rusher, like what you see a lot in 3-4s when they bring that fourth linebacker down as a rusher, though it might be a 3-3-5 here. And then instead of coming at the quarterback, he just drops in coverage. That's a very different thing. And maybe he's more comfortable doing that than I'm at the second level reading and reacting. You're still reading and reacting a little bit. But again,
if we value, I mean, Sonny Styles was a safety and he struggled with it.
Right. Like, Sonny Styles was a safety. And then he had 100 tackles this year as a linebacker. It's just, both of those guys and their development here has been funny to watch. It's just we've gotten to see Sonny's on the front page news because he's playing, and CJ Hicks is not necessarily playing. 151 snaps for CJ last year, plus a bunch of special team snaps. The one thing I do like about PFF, they don't include special team snaps, so you really get a real gauge of their playing time, which is why when we did this with Brandon Ennis, he was under 200 snaps because, he played probably close to 300 snaps if you add in punt return and kick return, but that's not what we're talking about here. 22 tackles, 2 TFLs, 2 sacks, and a pass breakup. And I remember both sacks. One for a very interesting reason that makes why we're doing this important, and the other one for an annoying reason that validated him for at least a week because he decided to tell me he was going to lead this team in sacks in 2024. And again, it didn't happen because of other things, but the first sack was literally against Akron, the first game of the season. And I remember when he got it because I think I looked at you and went, and then after the game, he came and found me and said, "That's one." I'm like, "All right, dude, just like, let's leave me alone." All right. And then the second one was against Northwestern a couple of weeks after the thing had gone viral. I think he did it with the Rivals guys of him going, put me on the you-know-what edge. They put him on the edge. He got a sack against Northwestern. So that's what we're banking on. Put him on the edge. James Laurinaitis last fall camp called him their best blitzer. So let him go do that instead of trying to teach him how to. Let him go do what Penn State let Abdul Carter go do. And I'm not saying that means he might be the number 2 pick in the NFL draft, but it does mean you might get the best version of CJ Hicks going forward, especially if I don't think he's going to be this is my last year. I think he might be back for a 5th year. So imagine 2 years of that for CJ Hicks if it clicks.
Yeah, I think it's funny. We were having a conversation in the preseason when I think maybe we were projecting depth charts. I can't remember exactly which pod it was, but we were talking about CJ Hicks right around when James Laurinaitis said that. And I think maybe I was the one who raised the point that, yeah, it's great having a blitzer, but you can't have it where every time on the field you know what he's going to do. And
Right.
I think you had raised the point of like, well, if he's playing a lot of linebacker, then it's not just going to be that, 90% of the time he's coming at the quarterback. And I think it got to the point in the year where the only time he was really on the field was to go after the quarterback.
Right.
And at that point, it's like, well, why not just use him as a defensive end? Why not just line him up on the edge and just let him do that and unleash? And I think the Northwestern game was probably the biggest sample size of us seeing how that looks. And it looked amazing. So if there's something you want to point to and say, okay, why do you think this could work? That's probably the game you want to go back and rewatch and see the way CJ Hicks was playing. So I think there's potential there, man. I think there's a lot of potential there. And I think when you look at Caden and Kenyatta, the element of CJ Hicks coming in to replace one of them, or maybe even play with both of them, I think is intriguing. It's a different element. It's a different look for offensive lines have to face. You face those two guys, kind of the more traditional hand in the ground, and then you bring in CJ Hicks, and I think it throws a different look at the offensive line, which would be difficult to stop, I think, over the course of 25, 30 snaps in a game.
We haven't talked to Mick Marardi. I mean, I did after the Cotton Bowl because I wanted to ask him stuff about Jack. But in terms of him being made available to us in the media, I don't think we've talked to him since the spring of 2022. I would love to talk with him because if you're going to change something schematically, that means it changes plans for guys' physical development as well, because you have to get them ready to play a position that fits a job description. Caden Curry is 6'3", 260 pounds. JT was 6'5", 270. Jack was 6'5", 260. Kenyatta Jackson 6'5", 6'4", 260. CJ Hicks is 6'3", 233, which is fine at linebacker. Is that fine at defensive end? If you're going to change your defensive front, it might be, because if he's the standing linebacker / edge rusher, then 6'3", 233 might be perfect. Well, maybe you put 10 pounds on him, get him to 240, just so when teams run the ball, he's not, just getting tossed into the ground going up against offensive linemen and whatnot. But it's when you change your scheme, it changes how you have to physically develop guys. And if you're going to change the scheme, if we get the first day of spring practice and we look at Ohio State's roster, because that's always fun to see whose numbers change, body weight, who all change. If CJ Hicks, who right now is 233, get the text, 614-350-3315, 2 week free trial, $299 for that. If we see, he's 245, yeah, we know what's happening. We know what we're getting ready to see when we walk in the spring. If we get in there and he's 228, 230, I'm not saying we still won't see it, but at least leaves the door open for he's still a linebacker at the end of the day. But we're gonna look at CJ Hicks this spring and know for sure not only what they're doing with him, but what they're doing defensively up front overall. Defensive tackle stuff. So here's the interior defensive line snaps this season. Ty Hamilton played 669 snaps. Tyleik Williams played 586 snaps, and that's because he missed 3 games. If he doesn't miss 3 games, he's probably over 650 as well. Caden McDonald is second with 216. Edric Houston is, fourth with 141 in 14 games. And then there's another big drop-off because Tywan Malone's at 95, Jason Moore's at 58, Will Smith's at 34, and I think that's it. Yeah, that's all the defensive tackles. Eric Mensah played 7 snaps, but he was a true freshman who wasn't a 5-star recruit, so he wasn't really a part of this equation. So my 2 deep is Caden McDonald and Edric Houston as the starters, which that's not a, what? No way, Steven, look at you thinking outside the box. And then I have Jason Moore and Tywan Malone as my 2s. That's probably universal, so we don't have to do the no, Jason Moore's going to start thing. I want to ask you about snap distribution, though, because ideally you want to rotate on the interior, but Ohio State has not really rotated on the interior over the last couple of years. The only difference between this year and last year is you probably take 100 snaps each from Tyleek and Ty Hamilton and give them to Mike Hall Jr., who would still be on this roster, which means that Caden McDonald would have probably played even less, and Edric Houston would have played even less because it would have been a 3-man group instead of a two-man situation. Let's just say they play 70 snaps against Texas defensively. Give me how many each of those 4 guys plays.
Well, it's tough because it's the first game of the season.
Right.
So I can't imagine these guys are in shape to be doing, 60, 50 plus snaps. I'd probably say Caden is probably around 50 and Edric Houston maybe around 45.
Mm-hmm.
And then the remainder is split, whatever the math is there with Tywan and Jason Moore. So
you think there's a divide?
I think so.
Essentially.
I think so, and I think that divide probably drops a bit when the level of competition. But with it being Texas in the first game, I think we see the problem is that obviously against a tougher opponent, you want your starters like Caden and Edric to get a lot more snaps than Jason Moore, but it's a tough ask because they've never had to do that. You ask them to do it in the first game of the year. So maybe I'm even backtracking on my own opinion there. Maybe it is more of a rotation.
It is difficult because it's so brand new, but it's not. I can't get the visual of Minnesota out of my head when they were doing what you're talking about at linebacker. This play it's Taraja Mitchell and Tommy Eichenberg. Well, now it's Cody Simon and Steele Chambers, who was playing running back 6 months ago. Or in this play, it's Kayvon Pope and somebody else. They were just rotating. And I think after the game, Ryan Day even got asked, do you not know who your best players are right now? And he can't say no, right? Because that's just not what you want to hear. But the answer he was giving was essentially no, we don't know who are best players yet. And it was a combination of a lot of these guys haven't played because they lost their top 4 linebackers, Justin Hilliard, Tuff Borland, Baron Browning, and Pete Warner from a year ago. And those guys, when you added Malik Harrison, that had been the top of your depth chart for the last 2 or 3 years there. So all of a sudden, you're restarting, and you don't have necessarily a G5 opponent, a low G5 opponent to start this off with and figure it out. If they had been rotating that year against Tulsa, because they played them week 1, I don't think we're asking Ryan Day, hey, do you not know who your best players are yet? No, because it's essentially a preseason game. But when you're playing a Big Ten team on the road on a Thursday night, hey, why are you playing everybody? Looking at the Texas game from 2 weeks ago, I don't know what day it is, man. This has been a lot. In this same month, we are talking about Ohio State's 2025 depth chart while also covering a national championship, and that has happened in the past.
And a coaching search,
and a parade, and a celebration, and a Rose Bowl. This is a lot. Jack and JT on the outside played 64 and 45 snaps. On the interior, Ty played 57 of the 71 snaps, and Tyleek Williams played 49 of the 71 snaps. Caden McDonald played 7 of the 71 snaps, and Edric Houston played 14 of the 71 snaps. Those are the only defensive interior guys who played. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that Cade and Edric don't come off the field in week 1. I don't know if it's the right move, but it might be your only move if Jason Moore and Tywone Malone don't take a step, because then you're talking 2023 Notre Dame. Jack and JT played all 70 snaps, and Mike Hall, Tyreek Williams, and Ty Hamilton played all 70 snaps essentially. I think obviously you split it up between 3 people, but I think that's what they do week 1. The bigger question and more important question is, are they doing that in a playoff game still? Because then that means there have been some developments that have not popped the way you thought you were going to do, which means you probably missed in the evaluation on the recruiting trail. So maybe this is not a question for Texas, because it's almost, again, it's get through the week 1 of a top 10 opponent and then let's reset. But it's something I'm keeping an eye on, because I said it last week. That was not great when Tyreek Williams missed some games, and it did not give me confidence that this is going to be a deep group that's going to be productive. I have confidence in the first 2. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have a lot of questions that I don't know if I'm going to feel comfortable about even after the first 4 games of the season.
Yeah, I'm interested to see also in that Texas game specifically. I feel like if you do have some rotation there, do you try to really push it in the first half so that you can keep Caden and Edric as fresh as possible down the stretch in the second half? If you think that those guys can at least keep it close in the first half for you, because that's going to be a tough test in the first game of the season for Caden McDonald or Edric Houston to play 25 snaps in the first half, and then boom, you turn around and all right, you got 2 more quarters to go against what I presume is going to be one of the best offensive lines in the country again.
Yeah,
it's going to be really interesting to see how ready are these guys to go day 1, because again, it's one thing to see the production and flashes, and when you're the backup behind Tyreek and Ty, but when you go in there, man, you got to play 50 snaps. It's a whole new world. What do you look like in the fourth quarter, right? Does Caden McDonald make that play against Penn State, goal line stand fourth quarter, if he had played 49 snaps before that? What's that look like?
Right. Because that's what it is now. That's the thing. Jack and JT and Tyreek and Ty, they were making plays in the first quarter. They were making plays in the fourth quarter. That's what you got to find out here is, as the game goes on and a talented offensive line wears on you, what are you doing? Okay, so that's our front 4. Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry on the outside, Caden McDonald, and Edric Houston on the inside. And then behind them, Zion Grady and CJ Hicks on the outside, Jason Moore and Tywone Malone on the inside. It's a lot of talent, just some guys who haven't necessarily had to play full games yet. And so I guess we'll see what they can do this season. We'll take a break, and then we'll come back and talk about Stefan and his favorite player here on Buckeye Talk.
Sergeant and Mr. Smith, you're going to love this house.
Bunk beds in a closet?
There's no field manual for finding the right home. But when you do, USAA Homeowners Insurance can help protect it the right way. Restrictions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Peloton. If you're looking for flexible workouts, Peloton's got you covered. Summer runs or playoff season meditations. Whatever your vibe, Peloton has thousands of classes built to push you and has something there to adapt with you whether you need a challenge or rest. Peloton has everything you need whenever you need it. Find your push. Find your power. Peloton. Visit onepeloton.com.
We're back here on Buckeye Talk. Steven Means, Stefan Krajisnik. This is your Leave No Doubt Monday pod. It's all about, a lot of the times, having conversations where we're trying to figure out if they left no doubt. Sometimes it's literally going to be answering that question. I think a lot of the times that will be during the season and after we've seen things with our own eyes. And sometimes it's going to be projecting things, and then maybe you guys doubt our ability to project those things. Like when we're trying to do 2 deeps, and I'm putting true freshmen in there, and I'm putting CJ Hicks at defensive end. Who knows? Maybe you have doubts about that. But guess what? Spring practice, we're going to get a chance to leave no doubt and go, no, he's definitely going to be doing it. I have no doubt in my mind CJ Hicks is going to be an edge rusher. Now we're going to talk about the guy we have 0 doubts about at all. But first, we're going to do the second stringers because I just want to save Arvell for a little bit longer. So I actually have a decent amount of true freshmen. No, I actually don't. I have 3 true freshmen in this 2 deep on defense. Obviously, Zion Grady, who I mentioned before. The next one is Riley Pettijohn, number 40 player, number 2 linebacker in the country. I am shocked that he's not a 5-star recruit because that dude looks like he's going to be awesome out of Texas. I have him as the backup will linebacker behind Sonny Styles, where essentially this year is learn the position from Sonny And then 2026 is take the position from Sonny because Sonny's in the NFL. It's very simple, Riley. That's your job. Learn the position, play special teams, take the position. Ready, break. Peyton Pierce, he's a smaller linebacker for them and didn't necessarily play a ton this year. Now, granted, he's getting ready to go through his first spring because last year, Stefan, you weren't here yet in the spring. But he had an ankle injury or a foot injury in high school that traveled with him up here, even though he was an early enrollee. So he did not participate in the spring. So for him to miss all of spring and still play 6 games, he played 31 snaps in those 6 games, and he had 4 tackles. And then I think he was on special teams a little bit. I think that's pretty impressive. So this is a guy who I think might make a jump, and a guy who James Laurinaitis loved. Even when James Laurinaitis was still a GA at Notre Dame, Peyton Pierce was going to head to Notre Dame. James Laurinaitis comes to Ohio State as a GA. Peyton Pierce ends up at Ohio State. Those are my backups. I don't think we have any questions about Sonny Styles. He's the first of 3 returning starters. So this is now a conversation about 2 people. You have to say something nice about Riley Pettijohn, or you can say something that's not nice. I mean, it's your evaluation, what you think of the kid. And then we can say all the nice things about Arvell Reese.
Yeah, with Riley, the first nice thing I'll say is, and usually we don't plug this kind of stuff on the pod, but he launched an NIL like merch stuff that I thought was actually pretty sick. So if you're a big Riley Pettijohn fan, go ahead and get yourself that merch. He tweeted it out. It's pretty sick. So I highly recommend that. I think he was the guy that, in the early signing period when we spoke to Ryan Day, and then you're kind of looking through the roster, you're kind of looking ahead to 2025, seeing, all right, which one of these guys kind of fits in. And he was one of the guys immediately who me, you, and Andrew were all like, oh, this guy has a chance to play, a good bit as the 2025 season goes on. He's got, like you said, I'm surprised his rating isn't even higher than it is. I think he's legit. I think he's one of those guys that's on path to have a big 2026 season as a true sophomore. And I think it's going to start with, getting a good amount of reps as this season goes on. So I'm with you on that. I think I have him on my 2 deep as well. I think he's going to be a stud. And then, listen, it's the weekly Arvell Reese hype show. We got to do it. We think this guy's, an all Big Ten caliber guy, an all American caliber guy. Maybe getting ahead of myself there, but listen, I'm just gonna stick to it. Here's if you haven't read Steven's post of the 2 deep, here's how the Mike linebacker description starts. Reese has a chance to be a star.
It is how it starts.
That is the first sentence. So
yep.
we obviously think very highly of him. I think watching him play next to Sonny Styles is going to be a blast. I think he's going to be so good, and I have no doubt about that. He's ready to destroy.
I also had or Garrett Stover at will linebacker in the post, just simply because Garrett was on special teams this year. He's a year older, and it's considering the fact that they are playing a top 10 opponent. So if there is a guy who's older and you're not sure if the freshman is 100% ready in week 1, I could understand if Riley Pettijohn's not with the 2s. Now, does that mean he's not going to be with the 2s by the end of the season? No, it doesn't. But you have to be open to that idea of coaches tend to go with players they trust when they're playing in matchup games. Because you have to. Because what you can't do is, Larry Johnson says this all the time, you try not to put a young guy in a high leverage moment where he can make a mistake. Because if he makes the mistake, depending on his mental makeup, it might stick with him. And now you've just thrown off his entire career trajectory because it's just, I made a mistake when I was young and I never got over it. So you never want to put a player in a situation like that unless you know they can handle it, which is why when you throw a ball to Jeremiah Smith on a tunnel screen that should have been a touchdown and he drops it, and it's like, all right, well, we're going to throw him the ball again. It's like, oh, okay, JJ's fine. Arvell Reese looks like Jeremiah Smith. They stand by each other a lot during warmups because I think the linebackers and the receivers are in the same stretching group in before games. And there have been so many times where I'm like, man, that JJ is just wait, that's Arvell Reese, what? And I'll be like, man, Arvell, wait, that's JJ. I don't know who that's more of a compliment to. Is it more of a compliment that there's a wide receiver who physically looks like a linebacker, and yet we know he can catch a ball while someone's trying to rip his face off? Or is it a credit to the Mike linebacker who looks like a generational wide receiver who can trigger and go, even if he had no idea what he was doing this year, he still looked pretty awesome doing it.
Yeah, I think both things can be true in this situation here. speaking of this group, though, like what you were saying there about Stover, and especially as it pertains to week one, this is why when we did our pod about guys he lost in the portal, I pointed out Gabe Powers, because I think having a guy like that would be beneficial in a situation like this for sure.
Yeah, he would be the backup.
He would probably play a good bit against Texas, I would imagine.
He'd be their third linebacker. I'm pretty confident about that. Now I'm not really sure if they have to go 4-3 at any point in the game, I'm not sure who they – well, no, they put Peyton Pierce on the field, but
CJ Hicks?
I mean –
you could.
You can 3-3-5 it. I don't have a problem with that. You're not going to hear me complain. Listen, I spent all year going, I love Arvell Reese, but also stop taking off Jordan Hancock. So anything that keeps your nickel out there, I'm for it, especially when he's that valuable. Sonny Styles is in a similar position as Cody Simon was a year ago, no, less drastic. Sonny Styles played 897 snaps this past year, had 100 tackles. Arvell Reese played 309 snaps at linebacker this year. He had 42 tackles. CJ Hicks, 151 snaps, played 22 tackles. Now, we think he's a defensive end, so he's not in this conversation. Peyton Pierce played 31 snaps this year, had 4 tackles. Garrett Stover only got 1 snap this year, but again, played a lot on special teams. So it's Sonny Styles is the leader of the room, and I think he might end up being the block hole this year. But also, he's not having to bring along a room that has absolutely no idea what they're doing on the field. It's more guys who are on their normal trajectory, which I think is a good thing for Ohio State's linebackers, just being in a better spot. Let's do corner. I'm going to save nickel for the last part of this. This one's a lot smaller. I mean, it's less position groups, right? It's just a front, middle, back end. I think this one kind of speaks for itself, the top 3. Jermaine and Davison as your starters. Davison Igbinosun as the second guy who's returning. We'll talk about the last guy in the last segment. Aaron Scott as a 5-star kid who got his feet wet last year. I think he had some good moments and some bad moments. In spring football, he didn't really look good last year. And there were people who were telling me, listen, man, he just kind of got baptized a little bit and he had what normal 5-stars have. Not the JJ thing of, I'm so awesome. Oh, wait, I'm not that awesome. I got to lock back in and prove that I'm awesome again. And he got better throughout the year. Ended up playing 74 snaps this past season. And then I put Devin Sanchez. And I think what this boils down to is, my question for you is, do you think, because we've seen a lot of Davison Igbinosun, and we think he's a quality player. He's going to be an NFL draft pick. And the question is he going to be a 2nd-round draft pick or is he going to be a 5th-round draft pick? I don't know if he's going to be a 1st-round draft pick because that's a combination of traits and film. And his film wasn't great this year, even if the traits were, which is, I'm sure, why he's back. Are you imagining this being a 3-man rotation with Aaron Scott, Jermaine Matthews, Davison Igbinosun, where essentially Jermaine's the new Denzel, Davison is still him, and Aaron Scott is the new Jermaine Matthews, where he rotates in? And then also, can Devin Sanchez make this a 4-man rotation by Texas?
Yes and yes. I think yes to all of that. I think Aaron Scott, if he makes the jump that we all think he can make, and like you said, I think he had a very freshman season.
Yeah.
We can't just think about Jeremiah Smith when we think about freshman seasons. Aaron Scott had to battle for snaps. He, if I'm not mistaken, got banged up. Was it against Indiana late in the game?
I think it was.
Yeah. And he had to come out. He went straight back to the locker room. Granted, it was kind of the final minutes of the game, but he went straight back to the locker room. So like he had a tough freshman season, and if he can learn from that, if he can make the improvements in the offseason that he needs to make, I think 100% he's in the mix to be in that 3-man rotation. And Devin Sanchez, if he does what he's capable of doing, there's no reason that he can't push for playing time that's not just in garbage time. So this corner position is going to be very, very interesting because I think it's – okay, be careful when I say this. I think it might be the most talented position group on the roster. And maybe wide receiver. Because at safety, you have Caleb Downs, but you got questions after that. At linebacker, you got Sonny Styles and you got Arvell Reese, but you got questions after that. And Arvell, as much as we hype him up, he's not a proven guy yet, right? Mm-hmm. And with receiver, you're loaded, so that's probably the one position where you can really make a push for this. But when you look at corner, you have an established starter in Davison. Say what you will about him, he's an established starter in the Big Ten. You have Jermaine, who is as close to an established starter as you can be without being a starter. And then you have 2 5-star guys who listen, if Davison had left, I think we'd feel pretty decent about the 3-man rotation they would have, because I think we both think very highly of Devin Sanchez, and I think we both think Aaron Scott can make the jump that he needs to make. So those 4 guys are as talented as you could ask for. Now, production is one thing, right? Different in traits and talent. But that room is loaded right now. And I think you legitimately, by the end of the season, are going to have 4 guys who are pushing for playing time.
You still have to go receiver, simply because even if you went, like, wide receiver 1 is better than cornerback 1.
Right.
Wide receiver 2 is better than cornerback 2. Right now, I think wide receiver 3 is better than cornerback 3, even though they're both 5 stars. Wide receiver 4, is he better than cornerback 4? That's the first place you have a conversation, because then it's like, okay, or is Mylan Graham or Bryson Rogers better than Devin Sanchez? And that's the answer we don't know.
Yeah, I'd agree it probably is receiver, but then I would probably say corner after that.
Yeah, those are the 2 best spots on the road. That's without question. Weird example. Buckeye Talk. I do these. This is part of the Monday pod. I throw out weird examples to Stefan, and the other is like, I mean, okay, which is him essentially telling me I don't know what you're talking about, dude, or it's him agreeing with me. Davison Igbinosun, since you brought up the wide receivers, is like a Emeka Egbuka. And I'm not saying he's as good as Emeka Egbuka, but he's a security blanket. And Emeka Egbuka was a very, very good security blanket. In fact, he was one of their best players.
By the way, all the mock drafts are coming around on Emeka Egbuka being a first-round pick.
Yeah, like, I don't know. That was never... Again, he would have been a first-rounder last year. He got hurt, guys. It was never... And I know I'm talking to Ohio State fans, so I don't know why I'm saying it. Like, you guys don't know that information. But to anybody who's listening who's not an Ohio State fan, dude, okay, if I had to rank Ohio State's first rounder since Hartline took over in terms of their ability to run routes, just their technical skills of running routes, he's top 2 as a route runner. And I think Jackson's the only one that's better than him, which is part of the reason both of them were in the slot. It's a lot of feeling your way around, spatial awareness, beating guys who are not necessarily in press man coverage all the time. Their last 2 slot receivers were awesome route runners, which is why I got intrigued with Brandon Ennis when you saw that 3rd and long play in the national championship game, because that was a dirty route. Because that's what you got to be in there. Carnell Tate is up there as well.
Yeah, for the cleveland.com loyal listeners, a lot of the mock drafts had him going 21 to the Steelers, so that could kill the vibes a little bit.
I mean, listen, for the sake of the NFL, keep him away from the Chiefs, man, because Patrick Mahomes is never
scream. He does scream like 30th, 31st overall, and it's like, how do we let the Chiefs get that guy?
Literally, it's like, come on, man. You just set up the Chiefs' future with Travis Kelce getting old. It's like, hey, Patrick, I know Travis is leaving, but now you've got this really fast dude, Xavier Worthy, who might have figured it out at the end of last year, and you got this dude, Emeka, who might be the best route runner you've ever had. Good luck, AFC. Also, Emeka was a security blanket. We all thought Jeremiah Smith had a chance to be awesome. We all thought Carnell Tate had a chance to be awesome. But just in case it took them a couple of weeks, you had this dude who you know can bring it for you in the first couple of weeks of the season. Now, granted, he ended up being a part of a long list of the reasons why that wide receiver room was great, but it's always great to have a security blanket in a young but talented room. And I think that's what Davison Igbinosun is, because you're right. This is probably the 2nd most talented room on the roster. And it's what's going to make spring and fall camp so much fun, seeing these 2 go at it. It was fun last year. It's going to be fun this year. But Devin Sanchez has never played college football. Aaron Scott has never played meaningful snaps of college football. Jermaine Matthews, we all think he's a dog. And he also has shown he can play in big games. His first start was against Penn State in 2023. So we're not worried about him, but he's got to take a step from being, hey, you should be rotating into, no, you should be out there and you should be all Big Ten level, right? He's still got to take that jump. Those 3 are still, to some extent, ideas. And you need at least one guy who's like reality. And I think that's what Davison Igbinosun provides, just like Emeka Egbuka provided it last year. Now, unlike Emeka Egbuka, who I don't think was ever going to get jumped by anybody in his room, I am not going to close the door on Not for Texas. I think Jermaine and Davison are going to start for Texas. But if we get to the Penn State game and the first two guys out there are Aaron Scott and Jermaine Matthews, or if we get to the Penn State game and the first two guys are Devin Sanchez and Jermaine Matthews, I'm going to bat an eye at that. I just think it's good that they have a guy they can rely on, because I was, again, talking to people. It's not going to be fair to say, hey, Devin Sanchez can be the Jeremiah Smith of cornerback rooms, because it's not anything against Devin. It's just, I don't think it devalues how good Jeremiah Smith was. So we said it earlier. JJ was not a freshman. JJ was just one of the best players in college football who happened to be 18 years old. That's a different world to live in. So I'm not going to say the guy who might end up being the greatest wide receiver we've ever seen. I'm gone. I'm going to be as hyperbolic as possible with Jeremiah Smith until the day I'm done. Okay, until he shows me I shouldn't be. I'm going to be saying, hey, Jerry Rice and Randy Moss, T.O., you're about to have a guy come join your table in like 20 years.
Yeah,
that's where I'm at.
Let him convince you otherwise.
Yeah, show me why I shouldn't say he's going to be at the table with them in 25 years. With Devin, I think if they were in a situation where Davison had gone pro and for whatever reason under the sun, Jermaine Matthews had hopped in the portal and they had to start Devin, I wouldn't be concerned. I would say, okay, so he's on the Derek Stingley plan, where in 3 years he's going to be a top 5 draft pick. But that doesn't mean it wouldn't have come with some bumps and bruises along the way, right? With JJ, his bumps and bruises were, oh no, I dropped a screen pass. And then after that, it was, oh no, I dropped your cornerback because he was trying to ride my shoulders to the end zone. Devin Sanchez is going to have some bumps and bruises this year. But by the end of the year, we're going to start seeing the Devin Sanchez that was the reason why he was the best cornerback in his recruiting class. But just don't expect Devin to be immaculate week one. I'll be happy to be wrong about telling people to not expect that. But I'm not going to put on this kid, he's going to go out there and have 4 PBUs on 11 targets and give up no catches and I'm just not going to do that with him, because that's not fair to him. And there have been people telling me it's to not do that. There were not people telling me to not do that with Jeremiah Smith. So I did it. Those are my corners. And I think that's it. I don't know if anybody else fits into this mix long term. I think this is I'll ask you this. Do you think Naeem Alford could have pushed for playing time had he not flipped to Oregon? Or are him and Devin Sanchez in two different conversations? And that's nothing against Naeem. It's just, it's almost like, this is where we'll use the Jeremiah. It's almost like Jeremiah Smith and Mylan Graham. Both of them 5 stars, both talented, but one's on a check it a year from now plan.
Yeah, he would have had to have done something that I don't anticipate, right? Like, he would have had to have made a leap in spring and fall that I didn't necessarily predict him to have. So I'd probably say Devin has more of an opportunity than he would have had. This room is so interesting because I think we both agree that next year the starters are Aaron Scott and Devin Sanchez, probably 2026.
Assuming Jermaine goes pro, yes.
Right.
And at worst, it's those 3 rotating.
It's so interesting that there is a real chance that Devin Sanchez is a first-round pick and he really only gets 1 year of impact at Ohio State.
Sanchez? Or
Aaron Scott. Sorry, Aaron Scott.
Oh, Aaron Scott.
Just the way the timeline sets up, there's a real chance that you get 2 years of Devin Sanchez as a starter, but you might only. And listen, Aaron Scott could very well play his junior year and say, "Hey, I need a senior year." But like, there is this path where you get 2 full seasons of Devin Sanchez starting, and maybe you only get 1 of Aaron Scott starting if he's as good as everything suggests he can be.
I mean, that's what might happen with Jermaine this year, right? I know he's right, where it's like, oh yeah, he's a co-starter. We trust him out there. They might be talking about Aaron Scott this way, the exact same way. I think that just says to you what the room is like, right? I mean, we're talking about that with Cardell Tate. It's crazy that he might be a first-round draft pick and he only had 1 year where he was a 1,000-yard receiver. Chris Olave never had 1,000 yards in a season. Garrett Wilson only had 1,000-yard season.
Yep.
Emeka was very close to only having 1,000-yard season because he just got over 1,000 in the national championship game because they forgot he was on their roster for a month.
He should have gotten 1,000 receiving yards against Michigan.
The fact that he is not both their all-time leading receiver in catches and receiving yards is that's a misstep. Because he's 20 yards off of Michael Jenkins. Because, again, he had one catch against Penn State. And he had like one catch against Northwestern. Like, that's got to be.
By the way, I don't know if all our listeners have seen the clip. Ohio State put out, I think it was their big recap video from the national championship game.
Yeah.
And there's a moment, dude, it might have been like in the third quarter. Mm-hmm. I don't even know how late in the game it was, where Will Howard's watching tape on the side on like the tablet, and Emeka goes, "Look at 29. Throw a go ball at 29 because of like the inside leverage. 29 is the corner that Jeremiah Smith on the last play. So
yeah,
Emeka, maybe he'll be a great wide receivers coach when he's done putting together a Hall of Fame career in a slot.
Oh, he's extremely intelligent. I remember his sophomore year, I was asking him all these wide receiver questions, and I felt like he took me to wide receiver school. I loved it. The funny thing about that clip is they're not even talking to him. It's Will Howard talking to Chip Kelly upstairs. It's Devin Brown. You can see him peeking in the corner, and I think it's it might have been either Hartline or Billy Fessler, the GA and the.
I think it was Fessler, yeah.
Okay, and they're doing reviewing the drive. And Emeka just happens to be sitting there. He's just looking. And then I know where he goes, we should throw a go ball at 29. Look at his inside leverage when he's guarding Carnell. Look what he's doing. I mean, I would have just thrown the go ball anyway. I don't know if the leverage would have mattered, but that's the difference between me and Emeka Ibuka is he has a football reason for why you should throw the go ball. My reasons are 6'4", 225 pounds.
Generational talent.
Yeah, let's just see. I don't know. Just throw it up and let's see what happens. It couldn't go that bad, right? At worst, you throw a pick that's essentially a punt like you did against Marshall. At best, you win a national championship. I like those odds.
I think everything about the college football playoff confirmed that in the first half against Tennessee when they tried the 56-yard field goal, a Hail Mary to Jeremiah Smith had better odds.
Yeah, that was, I love how we're talking about defense and this has turned into the Jeremiah Smith pod. Okay, let's take our final break and then we'll talk about Ohio State safeties here on Buckeye Talk.
Support your immune system with Airborne's most complete immune support formula yet. Airborne's delicious effervescent tablets are packed with 7 powerful ingredients to fill the holes your immune system may have, so that you can enjoy those unmissable moments in your life. Learn more at airbornecomplete.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
You know what's smart? Enjoying a fresh gourmet meal at home that you didn't have to cook. Meet Factor, your loophole in the laws of mealtime. Chef-crafted meals delivered with a tap, ready in just 2 minutes. You know what's even smarter? Treating yourself without cheating your goals. Factor is dietitian approved, chef prepared, and you plated. Pretty smart, huh? Refresh your routine and eat smart with Factor. Learn more at factormeals.com.
We're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan Krajisnik. Monday, Leave No Doubt pod, where it's essentially turned into we have no doubt in our minds if you just throw it 40 yards down the field to Jeremiah Smith, more than likely he's going to catch it. But somehow that became the conversation when we're supposed to be talking about the defensive 2 deep, which I think is just as interesting. It's a lot of idea and a lot of this is making me wish it was March so that we can go see these guys play in spring practice and get some real answers because it's so much more.
We'll get there, Steven. We don't need to wish that yet. We'll get there. We'll get there, all right? Jeez.
I was like, let me enjoy my time off, okay? The normal signing day is on Wednesday this week. We don't know yet if we're going, at least when we're recording this pod, because we're recording it on a Friday, if we're going to have a quote-unquote signing day press conference. They typically do, and because of obviously the early signing period, this signing day typically doesn't have a lot of noise to it. This year, Ohio State's not waiting on anybody. So if we do get Ryan Day this week, I'm sure the conversations will be about Jim Knowles leaving. Where is he going? Hey, how's your media tour going? Other coaching staff members getting interviews like Justin Fry interviewing with the Chicago Bears, Chip Kelly news, everything like reset, just kind of moving things forward now. So Ohio State's trying to both celebrate a national championship, keep their roster together, keep their staff together, recruit for the future, and get a team prepared to play in 2025. Don't you just love college football? Don't you love this calendar? Isn't it awesome?
So that's why I'm not We'll get to March when we get to March.
let it play out the way it's supposed to play out. So if we do, we'll be texting that information, 614-350-3315, 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. And if not, we'll just continue to have fun. I mean, we have fun anyway, but it'll be the only thing we're doing is having fun. Safety. A lot of oars. Caleb Downs is a starter. Shocker. So before you got here, Stefan, they used to have names for the safeties. During Knowles' first 2 years, they were called the Adjuster and the Bandit. The Adjuster was essentially a free safety. The Bandit was the strong safety. Caleb Downs was the Adjuster last year. Lathan Ransom was the Bandit last year. And then at some point during fall camp, Matt Guerrieri goes, I mean, they're kind of interchangeable, right? It's just, you know how coaches like to have weird names for things because safety is just not good enough. Free safety, strong safety is just not good enough. Guerrieri essentially eliminated that last year. And I think when you throw in Jordan Hancock, you see why, right? There were a lot of, okay, Jordan Hancock's in the slot. Wait, no, Jordan Hancock is up high. Oh, Lathan Ransom's in the box. No, he's up high. Oh, he's in the slot. And Caleb Downs is playing linebacker. So Caleb Downs is going to have a position. This is what I said in the post. The concept of adjuster and bandit safety seems to have died off this past season, with safety coach Matt Guerrieri hinting at how interchangeable the positions are. Plus, Downs' position is probably just a Caleb Downs position, as the high future NFL draft pick heads into year 2 in Columbus and year 3 and likely his last season as a college football player. Caleb Downs is playing whatever he wants to play this year. I am expecting to see Caleb Downs. When we look at his PFF chart after every game, it's going to go snaps at free safety, snaps in the box, snaps at the slot, snaps at linebacker. I mean, listen, put him on the edge and let's just see what happens, right? Snaps at corner. He is everywhere this year. So the question becomes, my backups are Leroy Roker, Keenan Nelson, who was a South Carolina transfer who didn't really play much this year. And I put Orr on Fahim Delane as just the other true freshman who I think, hey, he's an interesting watch. Can he put himself in the 2 deep as a top 100 recruit? But the real battle is between Jalen McClain and Malik Hartford. And I think right now Jalen McClain is winning that battle. But as you said, we're a long ways off from March, and who knows who we're going to see with the ones. But I'm going to go, for the sake of having a discussion on this pod and not just having a post, Jalen McClain as the second starting safety, because again, in a Big Ten game, when Lathan Ransom went down, that's who they put on the field.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to point to is we have one piece of evidence that could give us some sort of answer, and I'm going to lean on that evidence. It's when Lathan Ransom didn't play against Nebraska, Jalen McClain was a guy who stepped in and played more of the snaps as opposed to Malik Hartford. So I agree with you. I think Jalen has the edge. I think it's probably a closer competition than, maybe just saying this guy played this game, so it's definite that he's the starter. Like I think there is competition there. I think we saw Malik Hartford, come in late in that game against Texas and get to, be a guy that came in on that kind of Hail Mary play where he almost had a pick. So maybe they do trust Malik Hartford more now than they did, in October when that game against Nebraska was going on. So I think he's got a chance to push for it. Their snap counts ended up being pretty similar, right? McClain played 107, Hartford played 95, reading off the post you had here. So there's one piece of evidence that makes me side with McClain, but I think Hartford's still in that mix, and that might be the most set in stone, hey, here's a position battle to watch in the spring, is McClain versus Hartford in terms of starting spots.
So you brought up something earlier last week. I don't remember what pod it was. We do a lot of pods.
I think it was the Thursday pod.
Okay, you know where I'm going then.
Yeah.
About that nickel spot. Safe bet, Lorenzo Styles is your starter. He was the backup last year. And I have Bryce West moving into nickel. I asked someone flat out, hey, is this even a thing? They're like, yeah, there's a good chance he moves into there. But Jordan Hancock was a safety last year, essentially. That's it. That seems like more of a safety position than a cornerback position going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So you said Jalen McClain at nickel. Why him?
I think he's the most versatile. You think Hartford fits there more?
No. I'm just wondering if this is a way to get Caleb Downs in the action a little bit more.
I don't hate it. I also, you could have told me Caleb Downs is playing quarterback, and I'd be like, okay.
I mean, I could have told him he was playing quarterback, and he'd be like, "Yeah, I could play that too, Steven." That conversation I had with him in the middle of the season was hilarious. He went, I could play wide receiver in college. I'm like, dude, he said, not here, man, but just in general. I'm like, all right, just making sure, because you know what you go up against every single day.
There was part of you that probably thought he could do it at Ohio State too.
I mean, I'm not gonna rule it out that I think he could be wide receiver 5 at Ohio State pretty comfortably. The problem is 2 weeks after we had that conversation, he had the punt return against Indiana, and I went, oh, and then he came and found me and said, "You want to rehab that conversation?" I said, no, I do not want to have that conversation again. Last year for me with these players was a lot of me having just random talks with them, and then them finding me after games after their point was proven and going, "See how stupid you are?" And then me going, "No, I'm going to double down. I am right. I'm just early." And the whole Andrew Gillis, I left a lot of doubt, and then they showed me why I shouldn't have any doubt. This team was funny. I'm just trying to figure out safety. The depth chart almost doesn't matter as much to me, because it's the question is, where is Caleb Downs? Because that almost describes everything else. Because that's how I felt about Emeka going into last year. Of okay, before it was very clear that Jeremiah Smith was just going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. It was a lot of okay, where's Emeka? Right? If Emeka's at X, maybe then Brandon Ennis is on the field, and then Carnell Tate's at Z. If Brandon Ennis is at Z, well, then it's going to be JJ and Brandon Ennis. If he's in the slot, well, it's going to be JJ and it's going to be Carnell. And then it comes to find out, no, Brandon just has to wait another year. Carnell's just awesome. He just plays with 2 other first rounders, and JJ is a Greek god. I almost wonder if that's what happens with Caleb this year, where it's Caleb was playing middle linebacker against Oregon and making plays. He covered Tyler Warren and did a really good job. So I'm open to the idea of the Caleb Downs position. He's everywhere, and we'll figure it out around him, because this defense is going to be built around him this year. So I'm just open to what puts Caleb Downs in the act. If there's 70 defensive snaps, what makes sure that Caleb Downs is in the action for 65 of them? And maybe it's playing nickel. Maybe it's not. Those are my list of questions going into the spring. And we'll probably do a more concise version of that as we get closer to spring practice. But my questions on defense are, where is CJ Hicks and where is Caleb Downs on every single snap? Because I think those two things probably matter the most in terms of learning, because you're not going to learn if somebody's good or not in spring. It's development time, individual development. But you can get an idea of things in the spring.
Yeah, maybe when we were having the conversation of the third linebacker, maybe it's just a defensive end or a safety or your third linebacker.
We've been going for an hour. I can't. Oh, that's Caleb Downs,
the
Sam linebacker.
Your third linebacker isn't a linebacker.
Caleb Downs, the Sam linebacker. Oh, that's why we're not defensive coordinators, by the way.
Ohio State have 2 non-quarterbacks going to New York this year?
I think so. Has that ever happened? When's the last time that a Heisman ceremony had 2 non-quarterbacks at it?
Well, I mean, this last one.
Oh, yeah, Genty and...
But from the same team, I don't know if that's ever happened.
I mean, that's never, from the same team's never happened. I completely forgot about Genty and Travis Hunter this year, because again, one wasn't in the playoff and the other one lost in the playoff early. Listen, we've been in playoff for it. The Heisman was over a long time ago.
It really does feel like the Heisman was forever ago.
Which is weird. It shouldn't have been. But anyway, awards need to be after seasons are over. Or just split up the stats between the regular season and the postseason. We have enough postseason games. I'm not going on that rant today. We'll rant another day. I love this idea. Ohio State's got the best offensive player and the best defensive player in the country in 2025 entering the year. Could they both be sitting in New York and Julian Sands sitting at home going, I had 45 touchdown passes?
I mean, you could send him too.
Now we just sound like homers.
There's too many voters in the SEC for that to even be
that's never going to happen. We just sound like homers now. Now we gotta reel it back a little bit. In 2019, Ohio State legitimately had 3 guys for the Heisman Trophy cases: Justin Fields, J.K. Dobbins, and Chase Young. And I remember Doug Nathan and I even doing a video where we each took one and made the case for why they need to get to New York. Somebody's going to get left at home. J.K. ended up getting left at home with 2,000 rushing yards, which is a school record. And it's like, why am I at home? I had 30 carries against Michigan. I had 30 carries against Penn State. I had 200 yards. I had 2,000 yards this year. Why am I sitting at home? Well, because Chase Young had 16 and a half sacks and Justin Fields had 40 touchdowns passing and another 10 rushing. That's why you're sitting at home, JK. So I'm just wondering if, and this isn't a world where everybody is what we think they are, and two of them already are what they think they are. So this is a Julian saying is everything that a guy who was once the number one quarterback in the country and has already flashed his potential is who we think he is. Of those three, I think he's the one that gets left at home because he's the new kid on the block. While Travis Hunter, Chase Young, and Aiden Hutchinson over the last 5 years have opened the door for defensive guys to be getting to New York a little bit more consistently here, mixed with Jeremiah Smith as Jeremiah Smith. So, Julian, if you have 45 touchdowns and you're sitting on your couch watching the ceremony while Brian Day's sitting next to Caleb Downs and JJ, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you, my friend. It just kind of is what it is.
Yeah, the precedent's kind of set, too, for these non-quarterback positions where it's like you have to have a good year, and then if you have a second good year, then we'll consider you for the Heisman. Whereas quarterbacks, you can just kind of do it in 1 year. So, JJ's freshman campaign is going to be kind of the start of his sophomore year Heisman campaign. And the same probably goes for Caleb Downs because when people finally watch the college football playoff, they realize, oh, just because Caleb Downs had 50 fewer tackles doesn't mean that he's worse.
No, it just means he's on a better defense. Bama, your defense sucked.
Buckeye
so your
Talk.
True freshman free safety had 107 tackles. Free safeties are not supposed to have 100 tackles. Linebackers are supposed to have 100 tackles, which is why Cody Simon and Sonny Styles had 100 tackles.
Mississippi State had a safety this year who I think led the SEC in tackles. Mississippi State had the worst front seven in SEC history.
Jordan Fuller led Ohio State in tackles in 2018, and it's historically the worst defense Ohio State ever had. If the last line of defense is leading your team in tackles, things went wrong for the first 10 players on the field.
Listen, as great as Caleb Downs' shoestring tackles were, he was also the last line of defense on a lot of them.
Yeah.
You can't look at those plays and be like, that was a great play by the defense. No, that was Caleb Downs saving a touchdown.
Yeah,
it was a great play by the defense.
That's why we talk about him so much. It's like, listen, man, it's a good thing Caleb did that, because if not, that guy was going for yard.
Yep.
Okay. That's our defensive
depth chart podcast.
Which is a Jeremiah Smith, Arvell Reese, Caleb Downs love fest with a little bit of CJ Hicks might be a defensive end. Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, Caden McDonald, Edric Houston as your starting defensive line. Zion Grady, CJ Hicks, Jason Moore, and Tywan Malone behind them. At linebacker, Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles with Peyton Pierce and Riley Pettijohn or Garrett Stover behind them. At corner, Jermaine Matthews and Davis Ignosin with Aaron Scott and Devin Sanchez behind them. At nickel, Lorenzo Styles with Bryce West behind them, but the idea that maybe Caleb Downs is just going to be whatever they decide to do, so maybe he plays some nickel as well. But for the sake of a depth chart, Caleb Downs and Jalen McClain as your starters, but Jalen McClain has an or with Malik Harford next to him with Leroy Roker as the fourth guy in that conversation, while Keenan Nelson Jr. and Faheem Delane, maybe they make some noise as well. Get the text 614-350-3315. That kicks off this week's pods. Maybe we get day this week, maybe we don't. As we're recording this on Friday, we don't know. Maybe we'll know by then, but if we do get day on Wednesday, again, that's where we'll go with that information first before anywhere else. For Stefan Krajisnik, I'm Stephen Means. That was Buckeye Talk.